Today's 30 Minutes is part 2 of a 2-part conversation with former U.S. Congressman John Tanner. Here's Paul Tinkle.
Congressman Tanner, thank you for joining us on our program today. This is part 2 for those of you who listened to us last week. We have the Congressman back with us here in our studio, and we're talking about Washington. We're talking about some of the challenges that the United States of America has had over the years. Congressman, who was your president when you became the Congressman of the United States of 8th District?
George Herbert Walker Bush, whom I liked very much. He was a real gentleman. I'll tell you a funny story about being sworn in. When I was a little boy, 8, 9 years old, my grandfather, Walker Tanner, would go out to a place called Weatherford, Texas, to buy cattle, and he'd ship them back here to his farm out here in Obion County and feed them out and sell them to Real Food Packing House. Well, the mayor of Weatherford, Texas at that time was a guy named Jim Wright, and we went to the Tom Saunders Ranch out there to buy cattle, and I always got a new pair of cowboy boots and a cowboy hat out of the deal. But anyway, we would go to the Wild West days, Weatherford Wild West days, which was a rodeo out there, and sit with the mayor, because Tom Saunders apparently was a man of some importance out there. And so when I got to Washington in January of 1989, the Speaker of the House is Jim Wright. And I hold my hand up, he swears me in. I said, Mr. Speaker, you may not remember me, but I remember you. And I told him about coming out to Weatherford when he was the mayor, and he got a big kick out of that.
You haven't had what I would call one opposition to you when you were running that very first race. You remember when you were running the first congressional race for yourself, and what was that like?
Well, it was, we worked hard. There were 4 people in the Democratic primary. Ivy Scarborough, some guy from Jackson, Mayor Bob Conger, who was the mayor of Jackson, and former Governor Ray Blanton, who had rehabilitated himself after he had left the office of governor. And Governor Blanton was, there were 4 of us running, and we just outworked them, really. And we were very fortunate to win the primary by.
In this radio station many years ago, you told me Blanton, people still know him pretty well. And I remember that he was that guy that I really felt like, and I think you did too, that you had to keep your eyes on everything, particularly a fellow that was the governor of the state of Tennessee at one time.
We had to work. We did. We were up every morning. My whole Betty Ann, Elizabeth, the Portis, a whole bunch of us chipped in to work. We just outworked them. And then, of course, in November of that year, a guy named Ed Bryant they were enemies.
He was a congressman later.
He later became a congressman from the 7th District while I was still there in Washington. But I don't like this idea of people calling other American citizens who happen to disagree with them on a matter of public policy the enemy. There was a lady senator from, I think, either New Jersey or Delaware, named Margaret Chase Smith, and she made a statement one time that stuck with me, and she said, I look forward to the day when we do not fight each other, but fight our common enemy, the Russians at that time. To some extent, the Russians are still the military enemy, and I guess you could classify China as an economic threat. But calling each other the enemy because you disagree on a matter of public policy, disagreement on a matter of public policy is what I call freedom.
What was it like going from a state representative to a United States congressman?
Well, as I said, the legislature was a homogeneous, we were all Tennesseans, and it was very little Democrat-Republican. It was basically cities versus rural in the legislature, and you could do things in the legislature based on friendships that you made, and that people would try to help each other out. If you had a problem with your district that you needed some help on, you could usually get it. It didn't matter what Democrat or Republican. In Washington, it was more structured Democrat-Republican. But when I got there in 89, the House of Representatives was basically run by the committee chairman. And you had to evidence or learn some degree of proficiency on whatever that subject matter was in that committee to become a member of that committee, and you had to develop some expertise. everything was basically more or less policy driven when I got there in 89. In 1994, Newt Gingrich, the Republicans took over the House in January 1995, and as Speaker, Newt Gingrich took everything into the Speaker's office, and it became more political rather than policy driven, and Paul has never changed. It's still the leadership. I mean, when I got there, Jim Wright had to resign, but Tom Foley became Speaker. He would no more tell Danny Rostenkowski, who was the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, or John Dingell, who was chairman of the Commerce Committee. He'd no more tell them what kind of bill to write, and he'd fly to the moon. And if he did tell them, they'd tell him, "Hell, you're not the committee chairman. I am. We're going to write the bill in this committee because we know what we're doing, and it's not going to be political." Well, when they took everything into the leadership office, it became political rather than policy driven, and it's never changed.
How old were you when you went to Congress?
44.
Did you see things that you never saw before?
Yeah, it most eye-opening thing was the diversity. You had people from California, Florida, Maine, Washington, Idaho. And it was much more diverse than the legislature. We were all Tennesseans. You might live in East Tennessee or West Tennessee, but still Tennessean. So, but this was bigger. And then the foreign policy aspects of Congress. We didn't have much foreign policy in the legislature, as you might imagine. And I became very interested because I was on the Armed Services Committee when I got there, and I had been in the active duty in the Navy, and then I joined the Tennessee Army National Guard when I came back from the Navy because the military, they pay you over 2, over 4, over 6, and I figured if I got called back, I had 2 children, and I had to worry about, at least I wouldn't lose the time there. And because when we were in the Navy in Charleston, Betty and I, we were living pretty meagerly. I think I made $200-something a month. Anyway, enough about that. What was interesting was I branch transferred from the Navy to the Army JAG Corps. JAG Corps didn't matter whether you're Army, Navy, Air Force, only one uniform code of military justice, as you know, and so you could be a lawyer in any of the services. But the guy named branch transferred in 1974, and one of the Van Nunley was adjutant general, and there was a guy here from Weakley County that had served. My dad stayed in the Guard when he came back from World War II, and encouraged me to get in the Guard. They got me in the Guard, so. Being in the National Guard and having been on active duty during the Vietnam years, I felt like I was qualified, and I got interested in NATO and the NATO alliance, which I still believe to be one of the most significant alliances in modern history.
You later watched one of the most watched presidential candidacy, and it was a race. Let's talk about Mr. Clinton and a Tennessee boy here whose last name is Gore.
Yeah. He, George Herbert Walker Bush made a mistake at the Republican convention when he said, "Read my lips, no new taxes." You don't know what the situation is going to be and how it's best logically and rationally to react to it. So when you make a dogmatic statement like that, it might be good politics at the time, but it's short-sighted and foolish in my view.
So is it safe to say Ned McWhorter put Albert Gore Jr. and Bill Clinton together? Did that really happen like people say that it did?
Yeah, but let me finish about George Herbert Walker Bush. When we said that, then he was man enough to go out to Andrews Air Force Base in a closed-door session with the speakers of the Senate, or majority leader of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House, and works out something to save Social Security. He had to go back on his "read my lips, no new tax," and that got him in trouble with the Republican base. Bill Clinton was one of the. George Bush was wildly popular. Now he had kicked Kuwait Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait in the first Gulf War. And then he did the right thing. He brought them home. They wanted to say, let's go in and get Saddam Hussein. He said, no, that wasn't the charter from the UN. The charter from the UN is to kick them out of Kuwait. We've done that. We've succeeded in our mission. We're coming home, which again was a very wise decision in my view. But so anyway, Bill Clinton decided to run. Most of the rest of the leading Democrats at that time took a pass because George Bush at one time after the first Gulf War had a 90% approval rating. So anyway, so Clinton comes over. I'll never forget. He called me. I was in my office in Washington, and he called me sometime in the fall of 1991.
And he was governor.
He was governor of Arkansas, and we'd got to know each other. The not Reelfoot Lake Task Force, but the Mississippi Valley Flood Control Association, and there was a Delta Commission, and the governors were ex officio members. Clinton actually came to a couple of meetings. I got to know him, and so he called me, and I'm in Washington. This is in the fall of '91, and he says, "Can you get me a speaking gig in Memphis?" I said, yeah, I think so. I said, "Why you want to come over to Memphis?" He said, "Well, I'm thinking about running for president." And I thought, "Oh Lord, this is not gonna work out too good." But anyway, we get down to Memphis. I get set up for the economic club down there, and Clinton comes in, and these guys are pretty much well-to-do Republicans, so forth. Memphis Economic Club. I thought this is not going to go well. Old Clinton starts talking. 45 minutes later, they were lined up to shake his hand, get a picture with him, whatever. And I thought, man, the guy may have something. And then later on, he was in the governor's residence when Ned was there, and Al Gore came to the meeting, and I wasn't there. I don't know what transpired, but anyway, the Clinton-Gore ticket became a ticket in '92 election.
Bush was beaten.
Yeah, but there was a third-party candidate in that election, Ross Perot, and Ross Perot caught on pretty good for an independent candidate, talking about the national debt, which was another one of the issues that I was so concerned about, and I still am on the board of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, which could be an oxymoron, but anyway, it's a committee that we talk about the national debt all the time.
You were involved pretty closely in knowing that you had the relationship with Bill Clinton and with Albert Gore, and it looked like things were going to be pretty smooth here. And there were some challenges that we're talking about, things that took place in the White House, and there was a opportunity.
I tell you what Clinton and Gore did in '93 is with their budget bill, which passed by one vote and was one of the factors that led to the Newt Gingrich and his band taking over in '95. But what that did is it sent a signal not only to Wall Street, but really to the financial international community that we were serious about financial responsibility. And by that bill and what transpired later, we actually achieved a balanced budget in the national government in 1999 and 2000. What happened, Paul? In February of 2001, the second worst thing happened in that year. First, of course, being 9/11. In February of that year, the Congressional Budget Office forecast it'd be a $5 trillion surplus over the next 10 years. John Snow, who was George W. Bush's Secretary of Treasury, actually came before our committee and said we might be in danger of paying off the national debt too quickly. There was so much money coming in. I remember punching the guy that John Lewis, actually the civil rights icon, sitting next to me, and I punched John. I said, "John, this guy, you can tell he's new to town. if he thinks this bunch is going to pay off the national debt too quick, he doesn't know much about Congress. Anyway, what happened then is they passed the Bush tax cuts in July of that year. Well, in 2000, the revenue stream and the expenditure stream were both around 17 and change of percent of GDP, pretty much even. Well, they passed the Bush tax cuts in June of that year on the theory that all this money was coming in. I remember asking John Snow, I said, Mr. Snow, how you know what the economic forecast is for the next 10 years? I said, I'm from West Tennessee, and I don't know what the price of cotton's going to be in 10 days. And neither does anybody else down here, down where I live. Anyway, past those, well, what happened? All of the assumptions that were based on this $5 trillion surplus went out the window on 9/11. The whole world changed. And we never did adjust to that change that happened. And by 2002, or 3 actually, when expenditures had risen to 20% of GDP, and revenue had fallen to 16-something, setting up a structural deficit that has never been addressed. No matter how good times are, we will have a deficit in our spending and revenue because it's structural. And the only way you can get out of a structural deficit is change law.
I've got to bring in Congressman Jones, a thing that Congressman Jones, all of the Congress. The one thing that I think that brought America together is 9/11.
Yep.
Where were you?
I'm sitting in my office in Longworth building, and Kathy Becker, who sort of looked after everybody coming in and out and so forth, came in and said, a plane's just hit the one tower of the World Trade Center. Turn on your television. We had television there in the office. I turned on. I thought at first that somebody's flying around one of those tourist deals where you can fly over New York City and see everything. I thought I just got lost or wasn't paying attention, ran the building. And then all of a sudden, here comes the second one. And you could see it gliding in. Oh, man, this is not an accident. And then it wasn't maybe another 10, 15 minutes, and I felt a sensation. It was kind of like a little earthquake tremor. It wasn't much, just a sensation. And that was the plane that hit the Pentagon. And then that's when the whole world went, we're under attack. And by 9:30 that morning, there was a report, rumor, whatever, that another plane that went down in Pennsylvania was headed to the Capitol. And so they evacuated the Capitol. And I was on the phone, and I let everybody go, and I was on the phone in my office with either TV station with Memphis or Nashville, I don't remember which. Anyway, and policeman knocked on the door and said, Congressman, I'll be glad to help you get out. I said, no, I understand I have to leave. I'll get up and leave, which I did. There's a real wrinkle to this story, Paul, that people should be aware of. I don't know how many people are listening remember Dr. Escarcega in Union City, Rogie Escarcega. Anyway, his oldest son, Little Rogie, we called him, had married a girl from India and brought her by to meet Betty Ann and I in Washington in July of that year on their way to New York, where Little Rogie had a job. Well, that morning, September the 11th, his wife had a breakfast meeting on the top floor of the Windows of the World of the Trade Center, 101st floor, whatever it was. Only time in her life she had ever been in that building. And, of course, it came down. They never found her. But that's a direct relationship 9/11 has with Union City and the Escarcega family.
I have to move forward here in a short period of time that we have remaining with former Congressman John Tanner with us today. Congressman, you have seen a lot of presidents. You've shaken many of their hands, and you have always tried to respect every one of them. The day that everyone, maybe not everyone, but they thought it was close, that the vice president was going to become the president of the United States, lost Tennessee, lost Arkansas. Either of those two would have put him over. What happened?
It's hard to say. I have my own opinion about it, but I'm not sure it's correct. For some reason, and I can't put my finger on it, Al Gore had lost the rapport he had enjoyed with Tennesseans when he was a senator, elected to Congress and into the Senate and so forth. And I don't know why, except for the fact that he probably didn't pay as much attention to this. I hesitate to criticize him because I don't know what it was. But he had lost the rapport he had with Tennesseans. And then, of course, there was a problem in Florida with the election down there. The Supreme Court finally stepped in.
Let's take you to your next president. And you had another Bush, and then after that you have an Obama.
Right.
And then you made a decision that you were going to step aside at some point in your life. You knew you had to come home to Union City.
Well, I was at that time, in 2010, I was 66, and I was we had a little gym down in the bottom of the Rayburn building, and I was sitting down there one day with a guy from Mississippi named Sonny Montgomery. You may remember Montgomery G.I. Bill. We'd been on the committee together. Sonny's a great guy, avid Mississippi State fan. And we'd been talking about Mississippi State and Tennessee. Had played football, baseball, basketball, something. Anyway, I remember Sonny all of a sudden said, "How old are you?" And at that time I said, 62 maybe. And Sonny said, "Let me tell you something." He said, "Give me some advice. Don't stay here too long." He said, "I've stayed too long, and there's nothing left for me after I leave Congress if I do." And he said, "Don't stay here too long. You serve as best you can as long as you want to, and then look forward to something after Congress." And our son, my grandson's here with me. He brought me over here this morning. His little sister had a heart abnormality that was in. We had to worry about that, and fortunately she's fine now, but we had to go to Vanderbilt Children's Hospital with her. And I thought, I've done just about all I can do. Things were getting worse every day, every year with Democrat, Republican, jihad back and forth because everything had become too political. I mean, I was a politician, I suppose you might say, but I never was a political politician. I always was more interested in the policy and what we could do to move things forward. Anyway, and I thought, well, I've been president of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, which I was a delegate from the Congress to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly for 15 years or thereabouts. And I thought now's a good time for me to try to go home and spend more time. Everybody says that, but it's true because you lose a lot of time with your family when you're in public life. I don't care if you do it right. You lose basketball, you lose games, you miss a lot because of your public responsibility. And I just thought, well, I've done what I could to make things better. Now I'll look for other avenues to try to do it. And that's why I'm doing the International Conservation Caucus Foundation. The Earth, I tell people, I don't know that much. I'm not a scientist. I don't know much about the reasons that they think that this global warming is such a problem. But if they think it is, I think it is. And we don't have anywhere to move to. We've already moved. We're on Earth, and we have no place to move to, so it behooves us to take care of our only home we have as human beings.
What's the biggest change that you see today that has happened since you've been gone? Because I tell you where I think it is.
Yeah.
An inability to talk to each other. We're talking about Congress.
No question about it. This is, I think it's the end result of everything going back into the leadership instead of in the committees of where policy is actually made. And as long as you put in the leadership office, both sides, Democrat, Republican, it's going to become political. There are two other things that, if not done something about, I think will eventually erode our civic life to the point where we could have a dictatorship or something that would be unheard of to our founding fathers. That's one is partisan gerrymandering. Partisan gerrymandering has divided the country and into Democrat Republican districts, and they are unable then, because they're elected in their party primaries, to function with the other side. And the second thing, of course, is money. In politics, in my view, it's no longer left and right or Democrat, Republican. It's tops and bottoms. And the tops are the billionaires that are putting all of this money into these races. And the bottom is all of us. Everybody else, there's not a billionaire or a millionaire that spend all this money convincing people of something that's not true.
I'm going to ask you a question that I didn't think about earlier, but you made me think about this. If today things were different, now keeping in mind that you're 81 years old, and they said upstairs in Washington.
Thanks for reminding me. No, I'm kidding.
The point I'm going to, would you ever want to go back and sit in your office for a week or two and just kind of take that for a moment and say, I want to be able to see if I can get something taken care of? What would it be? What would it be if you could do one thing in Washington today, knowing that you had the clout to get it done? What would you like to see done for Washington?
An end to partisan gerrymandering and some sort of restriction on deficit spending. Those two things people don't realize it, but the bigger the deficit, the more interest we have to pay out of current income for past spending. When you are spending all of your income on interest, there's nothing left for investment in the future, which means this country is doomed in terms of a bright future, because the future has to have investment in infrastructure. Nobody can make any money on a dirt road with no bridge over the river, and human capital, which is education and health care. No country's ever been strong and free with an ignorant, sick population.
Did you pray a lot while you were in Washington?
You have to for guidance. It's a pretty heavy responsibility if you think about it. Pretty heavy responsibility. You got a lot of people's lives. What kind of life they're going to live? What kind of life these children are going to have? I hope that we can do better, because right now I'm very worried about it.
I'm so grateful to have you on the radio today. To look back,
you.
but more than importantly, to be able to share some of the history from the congressman of Obion County, the third congressman from Obion County.
Yeah.
This has been a very, I think I would refer to it as a lot of history that you just shared with us today. Yeah. And I thank you for doing that, Congressman.
I'm glad to do it, Paul. You all do a good job with trying to educate people, and I'm proud to call you my friend.
Thank you. Congressman John Tanner, retired and has made his home in Obion County in the 8th District. We hope you've enjoyed our program here on 30 Minutes. Paul Tinkle pre-recorded.
You've been listening to 30 Minutes, a community affairs program on Thunderbolt Radio. You can listen to this broadcast and others anytime by visiting thunderboltradio.com and following the Thunderbolt Radio and Digital YouTube page. Thanks for listening.